making a choice to bootstrap means that you're doing something for yourself, right? So why not have it be something that you want to look at and be totally proud of and not think that you're leaving something off or half done?
Hey, it's the Productize Podcast. My name is Brian Castle. Thank you for tuning in today. As always, I'm talking to Henry Poydar. He's the founder of Status Hero. It's a little SaaS app, software as a service tool for teams who need to get status updates from their fellow teammates. Really great for development teams to kind of a replacement for the daily stand-up so that they can give a status update into Slack, over email, whatever you need. I've been using it off and on and really enjoyed it. But today, we're talking about his story of how he bootstrapped this thing, how he transitioned out of working in larger organizations and then into consulting and then, starting up his own software business, all coded himself with some help from others. But yeah, it's been an interesting story, successfully bootstrapping from start to finish over the last 3 years. And a lot of lessons learned along the way. This was a good one. Enjoy it. Here's my conversation with Henry Poydar from Status Hero. All right, I'm here with Henry Poydar, founder of StatusHero.com. Henry, how's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for having me.
All right, so you've been at Status Hero for a couple of years now. How do you introduce it? What is Status Hero, and how do you describe it?
Status Hero is a check-in tool for software teams. It allows managers to collect daily updates from each of their team members, daily goals, and it merges that in with activity logs from all of the software tools that you can think about, like Jira and GitHub and things like that, and generates a report of what everybody's working on and distributes it to the whole team. Yeah,
very cool. I've been using it off and on for a while, and I found it really helpful to work with my developers. And I guess that's primarily what it's used for, right? Is like development teams to get that daily kind of status update without having to be like, hey, what are you working on right now? And kind of, not like nagging everyone on the team. It kind of just prompts them. I really liked the Slack integration, how it shows the digest and it prompts you on Slack too.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And the idea is also to eliminate meetings if you can, because generally stand-up meetings are loathed by developers in the first place. And now that there's so many teams that are working remotely across time zones and things like that, it's really hard to hold them. It's really hard to get the tech right and get everybody to meet on the same Zoom call or whatever. And so this takes care of collecting all that information asynchronously without having to have a meeting.
Yeah, totally. So before we dive back into the story of how you started this thing and bootstrapped it and built it up, can you give us a picture of what it looks like today? Here we are in the kind of the summer of 2018. How many years have you been at it? How many people are you working with? Any sense of size in terms of customers or revenue or anything like that?
Sure. So the first paid customer was in July of 2015. And I would say 2015, Status Hero was underwater. I'd say 2016, it was even. And I'd say 2017 is when it started making money. So 3 years in, trying to think of the best way to size up. Status Hero is priced per seat by user. And so each team pays a different amount based on how many users they have. Monthly revenue is around $50K top line right now, 3 years in. 20% of that is enterprise sales. So if you look at the pricing page on Status Hero, there's an enterprise plan that doesn't have prices, and that's sold basically by me talking to big enterprise clients and selling 1 2 year annual contracts.
Yeah, very nice. And how many people are you working with on your team?
Yeah, so there's a remote team of mostly part-time folks. I'm probably the primary developer because that's my background and what I like doing the most, although some of that gets farmed out. I work with some writers, designers, part-time basis, but everybody's remote. Nobody's sitting in the same office. And so it's a small team, and that's by design. I plan on keeping it that way.
Yeah, very cool. So I'm actually curious, again, before we get into the early days of Status Hero, today, you mentioned that you're doing most of the sales calls and the enterprise sales and things like that. How much time does that actually require from you as the founder? And what does that actually look like in terms of day to day?
Yeah. Well, at the beginning, it required a lot of time. And then I'm an engineer, so I try and automate all the things all the time. And so I've automated the process as much as I can. You can't automate getting on the phone and talking to somebody.
Sure.
But that comes natural to me because the people I'm selling to, I've been in their shoes before. So I understand where they're coming from. I understand their needs. And after that, it's a question of going through a procurement process, which I've done before. And a lot of that can be automated. So touch points for lawyers on agreements, quote letters, invoices, all that kind of stuff is scripted, a lot of it.
And then in terms of the product itself, 3 years in, is the feature set, is the roadmap like fairly established at this point, or are you really actively hammering out new features right now?
If I could do nothing else, I would just sit and build new features. So my team and I use this every day. I use it with a mastermind group as well. And I do spend actually quite a bit of time in customer support because, well, for a couple of reasons. One is that it's been a great sales channel for me. When you're talking to somebody even just over chat and they're in a trial, they're talking to a real person, and that's a meaningful interaction. And more often than not, it leads to a positive outcome and a subscription.
And we'll get into pricing as well, but are you doing a free trial or freemium? And when you say customer support, like, are you talking about pre-sales questions or existing customers? Or
Yeah, good question. So there's a free 21-day trial with a bunch of messages that are automated via intercom that come directly from me. So when people reply to them, I get them, and I do try and respond and not delegate those for the folks that are in trial. After that, you can sign up for a subscription, although we extend trials all the time, particularly for big enterprise customers. 21 days is just not enough for them.
Yeah. That seems to be like a not so talked about, very common tactic.
Sure.
With SaaS these days. I mean, everyone goes back and forth between should we have a forever free plan versus just a free trial? That is a good middle ground, is to have a free trial and then just really offer like an extension, couple of weeks to keep people engaged.
Yeah, I mean, I often get asked about a freemium plan. We have a very low-priced basic plan, which is essentially only email check-ins without integrations and stuff like that. And I think that's probably only 10 or 15% of the business because most people want the integrations and stuff like that. And I've thought about freemium a lot, but I've heard some horror stories about it. I know that Baremetrics went and tried it, and I read about that on Josh's blog, and I just decided that's not something, the trade-offs weren't worth it for me, and I don't think they are for Status Hero in the way it's sold, especially how high touch I like to be in the beginning when somebody's in their trial. And also I noticed with trial extensions are often lead qualifiers. So that people are, especially at bigger companies, are interested if a trial extension is something that keeps them aboard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it shows that they're actually engaged and they really do want to use it, for a little while longer. Because if they weren't engaged, they would have just walked away.
That's right.
Very cool. So yeah, let's go back. Like, what were you doing before Status Hero?
Well, I went to a mechanical engineering school, and I thought that I was going to be a rocket scientist. But while I was there, I ended up doing a lot of 3D animation work. And this is pre-internet days. We had email, but that was it. And so when I graduated, I started doing some 3D animation work, and I thought I was going to be a 3D animator. And then the web came along, and then I started learning more about HTML. And I had taken a lot of computer science classes as part of my engineering degree. So I dove right in, ended up building some very early websites with gray backgrounds and text files as databases for my band back in the day.
Nice.
And then moved on to just general web consulting. And through the dot-com boom, I ended up at a big management consulting firm working with very big brands on kind of first-generation web presences and first-generation e-commerce stuff. And then after the dot-com boom, I got very tired of working for very large organizations.
And I mean, you were doing like back-end development, database development, or?
Yeah, I was lucky. I got into the web at a time where you could get where full stack really actually meant something. So in order to put something together, you really had to be a full stack person because the paths weren't there yet for people to just rely on each other for different components. You just had to put it together yourself.
I mean, I feel like that's like maybe just a couple of years before I got in, maybe, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years ago, I started my career at a web agency working with major global brand websites, but I was in as a front-end person, front-end HTML, CSS, even like when CSS was just starting to really like no more table-based layouts. Now we do CSS kind of,
Right.
and that was like my entry point into the web world. But then I stuck with the front end for all the years since. And I'm only now in 2018, like getting over my fear of touching databases, basically. I wish I got more into like the full stack when I was, a few years back. But
yeah, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to that and to have, the engineering chops to be able to do it. But I do remember that very well. I remember the days of working with designers and, a designer would hand over a Photoshop file, cut it up and put it into these tables or something terrible like Cold Fusion or something like that. And
right.
Get it deployed, and deploys would take all day. And it was a lot slower. The feedback loop was a lot slower than it is today. So I think you're learning at the right time.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more tools out there. There's things like Rails that sort of help you learn all these things and become more rounded, I think, just by learning this one framework.
That's what I've been trying to learn the last couple of months is Rails.
Yeah.
So, I mean, back then, like you're working for a large management consulting firm, doing some early web work. I mean, did the thought of like someday going out on your own and starting your own thing play into it at that point, or like you didn't have that intention until later?
No. I mean, I was thinking that every day. Getting on a plane every day, every week on a Sunday, and coming back on a Friday is a really tough way to live, and I didn't want to do that. And I was doing that. So I was thinking about that all the time. And when I left, I went into the startup world, and I started acting as a CTO or the tech guy or the tech lead for really early stage startups.
So kind of like you got into consulting with other startups for... That's
right. And finally ended up in a situation where I was the CTO of an angel-backed startup. And after a bunch of, I guess, I'd say failures on the startup road, this one was actually not a hit, but it was doing very well. We presented at TechCrunch. This is back in 2008, 2009, when Web 2.0 was kind of coming around, I guess, the term du jour back then. And that company was eventually sold to a larger company, Constant Contact, which is an email marketing firm.
Yep.
And so I opened a New York office for Constant Contact and worked there for 3 years, essentially taking the tech from our old startup and merging it into their giant stack.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and actually the other company was a CRM tool. We had a CRM tool called Bantam Live, and it had a real-time activity stream, and it integrated with Twitter and did all kinds of things that were very cutting edge for back then.
Yeah.
And Constant Contact was looking for a way to upgrade their contact management components within their architecture.
Interesting.
And so they bought us up, and then I spent 3 years integrating that tech with a distributed team.
So you were kind of like the CTO of that startup,
yeah, that's right. And that was a Rails app, by the way. So introduced Rails and at scale to Constant Contact, and it's still running there today. It's one of the largest Rails apps out there.
I mean, what were some of, like, obviously now you're in this work from home kind of bootstrapped startup scene. Like, how does that compare to, first of all, working at like the angel-backed startup, but then a large organization like Constant Contact? Yeah, well, one of the things I noticed when I went to Constant Contact originally was that the signal to noise ratio completely inverted, right? So when you're in the startup world, back then anyway, 9 out of 10 emails mattered. It was something that you needed to pay attention to. And then when you go and work for a big company, especially these days, 1 out of 10 emails matter. And so it's, I learned that lesson the hard way because I was to do a good job, and I was in a management role at that point. So I was trying to soak it all in, but it was a fire hose. And it's almost impossible to do so. So you kind of hone another skill, which is learning how to tune some of this stuff out. So I would say that's the biggest lesson learned. I mean, I've never really worked at a huge organization. Like I had a couple of jobs at like agencies that were between 20 and 30 people, but I've never been in a 100 or multi-100 person organization. I mean, is it just like meeting after meeting and like just emails about administration BS that just doesn't matter? Like what is it that makes it so kind of bloated and slow? Yeah, it's all of that. It's meeting after meeting. There's different priorities. There's competing agendas at big companies between different departments and functional parts of the organization. People are I wouldn't say
I wouldn't go far as to say people are out for themselves, but there's definitely personal agendas at work all the time.
Right.
And so people are watching out for their careers and they're trying to move agendas forward. And when there's a lot of people involved and you need to get consensus for big decisions, things slow down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm starting to sense kind of the seed of what Status Hero is all about, of like streamlining communication and reducing meetings and things like that. Is that kind of where that started?
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I was saying before, 1 out of every 10 emails matters. I think we're starting to see that kind of distraction flow into the startup world as well.
Yeah.
With tools like Slack and stuff like that. And not to knock Slack, but it's kind of ironic that as software developers, in order to get stuff done, or any creative person, and I count software developers as creative people, in order to do deep work, you need to isolate yourself from distractions. And it's the only way it happens. But ironically, we're all working on software that's designed, because capitalists, and we're in business, to grab people's attention. So it's kind of funny.
Right.
At the time that we need work to sit down and we're working things that are to go out and capture attention.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tough line to walk these days. Like, especially when you're right, like in order to get work done, we need to, we can't be distracted. And like when we're consuming or buying apps or buying software, we just want to get in and get out and try it. But if you're trying to sell a piece of software, like you've got to get that attention somehow, right? You've got to make that connection.
Right.
It's tough and it's more competitive than ever.
Yeah.
But like before you left the consulting world and then you were with Constant Contact, I mean, before Status Hero, did you have anything else that you were, trying to launch on the side or things that you got into before?
Yeah. When I left Constant Contact, I had this kind of naive vision that I was going to launch a series of SaaS apps that were in line with my interests. So I had an app called Ski Juice, which would merge real-time data from Instagram, which is pictures, with ski area weather information.
Oh, that's cool. I'd buy that.
Yeah. I mean, so you could see, okay, well, this ski area is saying this is what the conditions are, and this is what the pictures look like from people who are there. That was the genesis of that. Then Instagram changed their API, and that became worthless overnight. I had an app for a long time called Poker Charts that I've since sold, and that was like a mint-type app for poker players. It kept track of poker bankrolls.
Oh, wow.
So I had grand visions of building that up. And then Status Hero was really kind of one of those things when I left Constant Contact, and I was starting to do some consulting work again, working with remote team members, and I just needed this tool. And I cobbled together a bunch of scripts that I was using at Constant Contact, as a matter of fact, just trying to figure out what everybody was doing amongst all of the pull requests and commits, and at the time, HipChat messages and stuff like that, just trying to understand what remote team members were doing. And I realized that it was something that a lot of people needed. And I was getting asked about it a lot. And that's when I decided to spend some time and really focus on turning it into a product.
I'm curious. I mean, again, even before the Status Hero idea, but the ski juice and the poker app. I mean, there are a lot of software developers out there who can build any app, anything that matches their interests and whatnot, like you did. But I mean, it sounds like you actually launched and shipped and had customers on those things too, right? Like
I did, yeah.
How did you get those out there as you're just kind of beginning your entrepreneurial part of your career at this point?
Sure.
Like anyone can just build an app, but how did you actually start to get it out there and get customers, even a poker app, to get to the point where you could sell it?
Right. So with the Ski Juice app, I was harvesting pictures from Instagram, but I was letting the people know that I was using their pictures.
Oh, right.
And so that was an acquisition channel for that. With Poker Charts, I had a version of that app running since 2003. The original version was written in PHP.
Wow.
And then I rewrote it in Rails, I think in 2012 or something like that. It was always a side project, and I always do kind of side project work for customer acquisition. And it never really took off. I thought, I'll spend some time and really market this thing and have it take off. But I found it really hard to market in the poker world because, first off, like just buying paid traffic is hard. Like Google won't let you go buy
something
with poker. It's gambling and stuff like that. So So that was hard. And also I wasn't playing as much poker anymore. So I lost a little bit of interest in it. But yeah, so I was experimenting a lot on forums and referral, but with all of my ventures, the best acquisition channel has always been referral. And with Status Hero, I'm networked into the software developer, software manager kind of world. And so I know those people, and through that community, I've really gained the base of the customers.
Very nice. So at the time that you started Status Hero, were you moonlighting this, or did you leave Constant Contact and go full time on this right away? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so I left Constant Contact, did nothing for a while. And then I did another rewrite of Poker Charts and shipped it. And then I started working on Status Hero full time. I think at that time I was also doing Ski Juice. So I was probably splitting my time between those two things. And, I'm not a great multitasker. And I actually don't think there's such a thing as good multitasking. So, when I say working on two things, it meant would be like a sprint, like a week or 2 weeks on one, and then completely leave it and go a week or 2 weeks on something else. So yeah, I think at the time I was probably only doing one or two of those things at once.
I'm always curious about people's plans at the time. Like when when you're setting out to launch Status Hero and do a couple of these other apps on the side, like what were you looking at in terms of runway, and like what did you expect to happen over the next year and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I expected it to be a lot more successful, a lot faster.
It's like the story of everybody.
Everybody does. Yeah. And like, it doesn't matter how many podcasts you listen to where, everybody says it's not like that. I thought, well, it will be for me.
My notes say it right here. How could it not be?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the first year was really hard because, I could kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, and the customer feedback was amazing, but it just wasn't making enough money. And I was still doing some consulting work to make ends meet and stuff like that. I had a little cushion from Constant Contact and that acquisition too, which helped a lot. But I kind of knew that if I stuck with it, it would turn around.
Well, what were the very first things that you did? Like, did you start by building a prototype of the app and then showing it to people? Or did you not write a line of code and start talking to people about it? Like, what was your step one?
Yeah, I did exactly what you're not supposed to do. So I didn't go out and do product market fit. I didn't go out and interview folks and come up with paper prototypes and put that in front of them. I actually built a working app.
But I mean, someone with your skill set, I mean, it's not like that's a difficult or super time consuming thing to do.
Yeah, that's true. I'm lucky in that sense.
I mean, like I'm the same way with a marketing site. Like, when I'm launching a new business, yeah, maybe I shouldn't perfect a landing page and everything, but like it takes me just a few days to do that. Why not do that? I kind of had the tendency to not be as pragmatic as I should, though. So I would, in your landing page analogy, I probably went too far and played with fonts a little bit too much and tweaked the palette until I liked it. Because at the end of the day, making a choice to bootstrap means that you're doing something for yourself, right? So why not have it be something that you want to look at and be totally proud of, and not think that you're leaving something off or half done? Yeah. And these days, I mean, there is a high bar of quality and credibility that you do have to, a lot of people, like, I feel like there's a misconception about MVPs and alphas and beta versions, and that it's supposed to look crappy and everything. Like, it's supposed to be simple, like just focus on one or two features, but it should not be a piece of crap. Like it's got to look legit and feel legit.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I agree. And, there are some things that you can do that will really expose your product. Like, for example, a product hunt launch that you're only going to really get one shot at, right? So you can't really afford to have that be the crappy thing. Now, I had a bad experience with that. I had a great experience with that with Ski Juice. Somebody hunted Ski Juice and it took off, and it was like 100x traffic overnight. And then with Status Hero, I'm not sure Product Hunt is like this today, but there's two kinds of ways you can hunt for products. As an influencer, you can hunt something and then it gets put onto the homepage, and as an average Joe, you can hunt something and it gets lost in this like upcoming thing. And I had a competitor to Status Hero hunt it in order for it to be hunted, and then purposely as not an influencer, so that it would be in this up. So it's on Product Hunt, but not in the way that I would like. I would like to get like Eaton Shaw or something to submit it rather than.
Yeah. Product Hunt is one of those things that I've never really cracked that egg. Like I just haven't spent enough time on it. And I know some people who are like quote unquote influencers on Product Hunt, but like, I don't know, like I've never really figured out the formula to have a successful launch on Product Hunt. Like I've launched, thrown up a couple of things and it's crickets, but is it kind of like luck of the draw, kind of timing, kind of fit for that audience and that kind of all plays into it?
I think it's all of those things. I think there's a lot of luck involved. You got to hit right people at the right time. I think that the best outcome for something in Product Hunt is to get leads into your pipeline, so to get email addresses to your pipeline. I'm not sure it's trials. I'm not sure it's customers. I think it's just getting people into your pipeline, because I think for a product like Status Hero, nobody's ready to buy when they hit the landing page, right? You're at an awareness stage. And so you're trying to get them from awareness to evaluation. And I'm not sure Product Hunt does a great job of that. I think it just gets people to awareness and then drops off. So you have to find a way to retain them somehow.
Right. Was that the first point of exposure, or did you start to like get it out to people?
No, I had a private beta. That was the first exposure. I emailed my network.
Just like personal contacts of yours?
Personal contacts who I'd worked with, who I thought give me some good feedback and who I wanted to find out what they thought.
And at this point, like you basically built kind of the core like status update functionality and the ability to email with your team.
That's right. Yes, I'd done all that, and I had crunched through all of the math to make it work across time zones, stuff like that. And that was not an easy to do. Time zones are.
But like, how did you actually like present it? Like this is another area where I know a lot of people get kind of stuck. They don't really know how to do this the right, quote unquote, the right way. Like, what was the message that you sent to these contacts, and what did you ask of them? Like, did they get free access, or like, what was that whole deal?
Yep. So I basically, I would always couch it as I've got something that I think is going to help you, because I truly think it does help them. I've been in your position before, and this is a thing I built to address this problem that we all have, which is we're managing remote teams, we're managing distributed teams, and we're just inundated all the time with all this noise, and it's really hard to cut through it and figure out what everybody's doing. So check this out, try it out, give me some feedback. Here's a free account. It's in private beta right now. I'd love to chat with you about it if you can. And by something in the onboarding with Status Hero is that I'm never trying to get a manager to come on and just onboard their entire team in one go. That's usually not going to be successful for them. And so even in the onboarding now is the same message that I used back then with the initial users, which is just try this with one or two team members, put them on there.
Yeah, that is a tricky thing about team-based apps. And it's something that I'm thinking a lot about right now as I'm thinking about a team-based app. And it's like, because I know whenever I'm evaluating something for my team, I'm not going to invite anybody on my team until I really, check it out.
Yeah, it's hard to get them to get that one or two people involved.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's very important. It is hard. You're right.
What was like the initial feedback from there?
The initial feedback, well, originally Status Hero was a weekly tool. So it was collecting things once a week. And it also was doing a pulse survey, which is a feature I'd rather bring back. So it not only collected, hey, this is what everybody's working on, and these are their goals for the upcoming week, but this is how they feel about the current work. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about the technical quality of the work? 1 to 10, how do you feel about whether we're going to hit our milestones or not? I think there was one other question, like a pulse survey type question. And unfortunately, it made it really hard to explain what Status Hero did. So right now I can say automated reports for software teams. But then I was kind of struggling and tripping over myself saying, no, it's pulse surveys and it's check-ins and it's collecting all this stuff.
Yeah, it kind of does this and it also does that. And
Yeah. So so the first thing I did based on that initial round of feedback was cut that feature out and then double down on the original feature, which was collecting the status updates. So that became, you can now pick daily, weekly, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever you want. You can pick every day if you want. There's some masochist teams on there that have every day status updates, weekends included.
Wow. So when did pricing play into this process of getting it out there? Like how long were those beta people using it? And did you present to them, like, here's what the price is going to be? And like, how did you roll that out?
Yeah, so it was 6 months of that. The original folks that I tested with weren't price sensitive at all. So they were with big companies. They were managing bigger teams. And so pricing was really difficult because of that, because my initial users weren't startups who were price sensitive at all. So the original pricing, like I think everybody else does, this was a total guess. And it was team-based. So I think my original plan was a basic plan for $20 for a team per month, and then up to 50 a month. And
so you kind of had like tiers, like the.
I did.
Okay.
I still had tiers when I launched. Yep. I had a basic plan and I had a pro plan. And then I added a corporate plan when I built all the SSO stuff.
Got it. And then what we're seeing today is a price per head. And of course, pricing changes all the time, but at this recording, like I'm looking at like 3 per user up to 7 per user. And
yeah, that's right.
When did you make that change to get out of the tiered into this?
Yeah, so that was about a year in. I was just looking at usage patterns in the site, and there were some teams that were totally gaming the system. Some remote teams, there were big development shops out of the Philippines and out of Eastern Europe that had like 200, 300 people on a team, and they're paying $50.
That's interesting for Status Hero. Like, how could they game the system if it's all about individuals' status updates?
Well, and again, like I don't think they were getting great use out of the tool either at that point, because you're looking at a dashboard of hundreds of people on a team, and like trying to sift through that report, you have the same problem that you had originally.
Oh, like they put multiple people's updates in the same update, basically.
Right. So what I did is at the same time, I split up Status Hero so that you could have multiple teams within a single account. And then I started charging by user. But I only charge for each user once. So you could have a user that's on multiple teams in the same account, but they're only charged once.
I mean, I've also had that question come up because I've had like the tiered approach, and there's some confusion over like, well, I'm an agency, so which tier do I need depending on how many people I have? And yeah, it gets complicated. So yeah, I like how this kind of simplifies it.
Yeah. And you know, it was tough to think through because at the time and still now, everybody advises against per seat pricing. Patrick from Price Intelligently, who I admire a lot, I've seen his talks and I think they're great. He says that per seat pricing is something you should totally avoid unless a user is a value metric. Now, in Status Hero, it's arguable that a user is a value metric because as a manager, you're getting a little bit of value out of each user that's reporting. So I think I kind of, within that Venn diagram of having it work.
Yeah, I mean, especially since your tool is so, it is user / team. But I don't know how to explain it, but the whole, yeah, you're right. Like the whole value is communication among the many members of your team, and teams can be of any size. So
right, but yeah, when I made that switch, it doubled the revenue overnight. It was a big change.
Oh, really? It did.
Yeah.
And you applied that change, like you didn't grandfather people in. It was.
I did. I just did it. And yeah, I had like I doubled the revenue and had an immediate 10% cancellation churn. Yeah. And it was just so new at the time. I just felt like I need to rip this Band-Aid off. You know, building all the code to grandfather everybody in and stuff like that. I thought it wasn't worth it. I could just lose the customer.
You weren't afraid that this might be a decision that you might need to undo? I mean, you could undo it, but after having made the announcement and...
Well, what I was prepared to do was offer deep discounts for anybody who wanted it, so that it would effectively be grandfathering and having a similar price to it. But I didn't really get any pushback at all. I just had some people cancel and a couple of angry emails, and that was it. And again, the user, it was small at that time.
So, I mean, like I guess getting back to those early days, right? So you kind of get it out to your contacts, you go through this kind of 6-month period of beta usage. Like, what were some of those first accounts? What did they look like? Like, were we talking like teams of 2 or 3, teams of 20, 50? Like, how soon were you able to start to get significant revenue in the door?
Yeah, significant revenue was 6 months in after that first customer in July of 2015. At that time, you know, I wasn't really going after the enterprise sales, even though those are the folks that were the initial beta users, because I wanted the automated credit card sign up, make money when you sleep thing to work. You know, I wanted it to be low touch because I wanted to play with product and wanted to paint colors and have it work for me and not do sales. I've changed my tune on that, obviously. But yeah, at the beginning, it was the initial sweet spot for teams has always been like 10 or 15 people. for whatever reason, whether they're 10 or 15 people within the same team in a much larger company or a startup with 10 or 15 people. That's really the sweet spot for customers and always has been.
What were your first kind of wins in terms of going beyond your personal network and personal referrals and getting new trials and new users in the door?
Yeah, I think the big wins were getting, I think probably going through the first enterprise sales cycles and getting a couple of big companies signed up.
How soon into the life did you make?
That was probably 6 months in.
Okay. So pretty early on, you started to think about.
Pretty early on. Yeah. I mean, but it was just, one or two, and I wasn't focused on it. I was focused on making sure the product worked well for self-service.
And how did you go about getting into enterprise?
Well, I think it was MicroConf 2017 or 2016. I think it might have been 2016, where Nathan Barry gave a talk about how with ConvertKit, he wasn't getting enough revenue, and he just went out and did direct sales.
Yeah, I talked to him all about that on this podcast a couple weeks back, if people are interested. But yeah, I mean, you're right. What Nathan did in the early days of ConvertKit, just person to person, Trello boards, just get it done.
Yeah. And I think he had a couple examples where he was flying out and doing some unscalable things. And I realized that was something I needed to do. And I branched out a little bit more. I got some partnerships going with Slack, for example. So before Slack had the app directory, they had just a list of apps. And Status Hero was in that list for a little while. And then it was one of the first apps into their app directory, which is now flooded with apps.
But how did you go about starting to make those contacts, talking to the right people in the large enterprise organizations to get those conversations started?
Yeah, it's a lot of luck, and it was a lot of referral conversations. So I was very fortunate to have this network established before I built the app, which allowed me to kind of branch out and use that as a base for most of these conversations. And then the partnerships helped as well. So like I said, being in the Slack App Store gave the app a lot of credibility, as well as customers. And I also started working at a WeWork, in WeWork Labs, which is like a kind of a startup incubator where they just don't give you any money or anything like that. It's just you're working with other entrepreneurs. And so I was just sitting around a bunch of startups as well, and I was sort of the older weathered dude amongst all of the younger kids working on these interesting things. And so they would give me a lot of feedback and try things out and expose me to their networks as well.
Very nice. Where did integrations play into all this? Because I mean, looking at your integrations page, it's almost like endless. Like I'm seeing, I don't know, like 50 different integrations here. So I mean, clearly that's been an important piece of the puzzle here, right?
Yeah, it's a very important piece of the puzzle. Well, the long-term roadmap for Status Hero is the theme there is to help managers cut through the noise and give them insights to help them deliver better software. And that might be faster, it might be more efficient, whatever works for them. And so that means taking all of this data and giving them insights. And as you know, the more data you have, the better insights that you can give. So, a year and a half ago, or I guess about a year ago, I really started hammering and doubling down on the integrations and making sure that those all worked really well.
How do you, is it based on user requests? Like, does it integrate with X, Y, and Z? And so that's how you start to understand what to prioritize and work on?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I use the tool every day too. So I mean, I started with the tools that my team uses, which are low-hanging fruit really, because a lot of teams use them. So things like Pivotal Tracker and GitHub, stuff like that, those are first. Connecting up Intercom, stuff like that helped as well. And then I just kind of went down the list of commonly used software development tools and started knocking them off.
Did you or do you have any rollout strategy when it comes to integrate? People talk about integration marketing as a channel. Do you do these co-branded blog posts or announcements or things like that?
Yeah, some of them have been. I try and reach out to everyone that we do an integration with. And, the smaller companies are super receptive and put Status Hero right up on their website, and there's co-marketing and things go out to both email lists and stuff like that. Clubhouse is a great example of that. They make a project management app that's very popular now. Clubhouse integration, and they were great. Got a ton of users from them. They use the tool themselves, which always also helps. And that's how they found out about us and pushed us to do the integration. So those have been great. The other ones with bigger companies, so like Asana, for example, did an integration with Asana, went through all the mechanisms to get onto their marketing integrations page, and it's total crickets from their end. I have I think Streak CRM task that comes up every week, like check in with Asana, and I do. Hey guys, do this integration.
Right. I mean, once these big players get to that level, especially for project management apps where everybody wants to integrate with them, it's got to be tough.
Yeah. I've also noticed that, it is going to be more, again, you're getting into awareness marketing because Status Hero is not, is so small at this point. Like it's not on the tip of anybody's tongue. You're just kind of introducing them to the tool itself through these integrations. So for example, we did an integration with GitLab, and they featured us right into on their GitHub because of the Microsoft. And I thought it was going to be this massive influx of users. And it wasn't at all. It's a slow trickle. Because again, I think we're doing things like maybe making them aware. And I think maybe down the line, some of those folks will become customers. But I don't think people are going to these integration pages and just like clicking through and adding them right away.
Yeah. That always kind of, I've always had this, it always bugged me when people talked about like integration marketing as the answer to all of your marketing challenges. And I just never bought into that because I see integrations as it's a product decision. That you might get some random unexpected marketing benefit out of it, but it's about being able to satisfy a customer's demand for having this integration. And you should be doing integrations, but not making that the centerpiece of your marketing strategy,
Totally, 100%. And again, that's the strategy with Status Hero. The integrations are there to bring data into the tool so that we can help our customers with better insights. The marketing stuff is icing on the cake when it works.
Right. So, I mean, like big picture from start to finish here, as we get into 2018, I mean, you've been bootstrapping this the whole way through, correct?
Whole way. Yep.
Has it been like the steady climb in revenue and comfort level and all that, and like no hockey stick growth or big like spikes or anything like that?
No hockey stick. There was a big spike when I changed prices.
Right.
But that's now way over towards the bottom of the ramp now, and it's a slow ramp.
The other thing that comes to mind here is that staying profitable and keeping the margins healthy at this level. I mean, as you're ramping up, like you said that you're still doing a lot of things yourself, the sales, the customer support. Is that becoming a bottleneck at some point? Like, are you does this look like it can continue to grow for a while without you growing the team?
I think it does have a lot more room for growth before I need to grow the team. I do. I think there's still a lot of headroom there. And the reason that I'm holding back on that, and I'd probably be advised by a lot of people not to do that and to grow the team faster and spend that money now, is that I think taking on managing folks is a massive responsibility. It takes a lot of mind share, and it's something I don't take lightly. I've done it before. And I'd like to be able to do that with just as much intensity and passion as I do everything else. So, I've spent my whole career managing folks. So I'm, having a break from that for a little while has been great. So I'm sort of holding back on that until I have to.
I hear you, man. I mean, like it's one of those things that, like, again, like in the startup world, it's like, oh, you got to grow your head count. I mean, you're in a beautiful position right now where it's like you're growing, profitable, and you don't have to grow those costs.
Yeah. And I do have help. I have, the part-time help, which makes a difference.
But do you ever run into like ability to ship as fast as you want to or need to, or maybe you don't need to move as fast as other companies need to at this point?
Yeah, I do run across that. There's some things that have taken longer than I've wanted because of unanticipated obstacles, like for example GDPR, getting everything teed up for that. That took a big chunk of time, which I would have rather had dedicated to making the product better and improving and adding some things. So yeah, in that case, it would have been great to delegate a bit more. We probably could use the help for that. And I do see sometimes like, okay, well, this feature would have shipped a lot faster if I had 3 other developers working on this with me. But I don't know. I like doing that work. So what can I say?
Hey, I don't blame you. So what's next? Like what's coming up as we finish out the year, head into next year? What do you see kind of coming up in the trajectory of your work here?
Yeah. So But as you've seen, like there's been a big push to add all of these integrations. There's another big push now to get the Zapier integration to be much better using Zap templates, which is something that they provide. It's more development on our part. And to kind of, once we've got more and more data collected, to dig a little bit deeper into the insights and the reporting and try and really get at things that are going to help software managers deliver faster and better. And I think there's plenty of data and low-hanging fruit that we'll attack first. But there's more aspirational stuff. I think there's some opportunities for machine learning and stuff like that, and modeling, trying to anonymize our data, and so you can kind of compare it to how other teams are delivering. Yep. So stuff like that.
Like benchmark it. Awesome. Well, Henry, it's been a really awesome story, inspiring for me, and I'm sure for a lot of listeners here. I love what you've been doing with Status Hero. Again, I've been using it. I think it's a great product, really useful if you have even just a small team. So yeah, thanks for coming on. And of course, it's statushero.com. Where else can people connect with you?
henrypoydar.com, which has links to all of my Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get it all linked up in the show notes. So yeah, thanks. Thanks, Henry.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. Really appreciate it.
All right, now before we wrap up, let me ask you, what'd you think of this one? Was it good? You learned something? Are there any other topics you'd like to hear me cover on this pod? Well, let me know. No, I mean really, let me know. Hit reply on any of the emails that I sent you. I'll read every single one. I try to reply to everyone. What's that? Oh, you're not on my list yet. Okay, well, head over to my site, productizepodcast.com. You can get on my email newsletter that way. I'll send you, new episodes and all the show notes, but I'll also send you my newsletter where I share all sorts of articles and other insights on entrepreneurship, building products, productized services, software, SaaS, and other cool stuff there. So yeah, check that out over at productizepodcast.com. And of course, if you have a minute, I'd really appreciate it if you could head over to iTunes, leave a 5-star review, or at least just 5 stars. You don't even have to leave a review if you don't want to, but that would really go a long way to helping other folks like us find this podcast. So yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in. I'll talk to you on the next one.